What's good, people? Agent Jules reporting for duty. So, I finally took the chance to watch through the entirety of Midnight Gospel, and I have some choice words to say about it. They're not bad words, but it's an interesting cartoon, this Midnight Gospel, and I kind of wanted to dissect my thoughts on it because I don't have a very simple opinion on it. It's a very complicated set of opinions that I have. So with that said, let's all buckle into our favorite virtual reality womb thingy, inhabit a properly themed body for the episode at hand. Of course, smash that like button to appease the YouTube algorithm, as always. And let's go ahead and dive into this insanity. So before talking about the show proper, let's go ahead and talk about the speed paint I'm doing, or in this case, a speed animation. I don't know whether you people are familiar with the epic Sax guy meme, specifically the Gandalf one, where he's just kind of nodding along with it. It's somewhat famous, I guess. The point is, I'm lampooning that. I'm drawing Clancy, the main character of Midnight Gospel, doing the Gandalf nod thing on along with the epic sax guy. So I figured, it's funny because they both have wizard hats and they both smoke opioids, so it seemed thematically appropriate. Okay, so Midnight Gospel. Midnight Gospel is the TLDR of my thoughts on it is I did not enjoy it, but I do respect it as a show. Midnight Gospel is basically a podcast. It's a podcast about a character, Clancy, the main character, who lives on a weirdo planet, and he has this virtual reality machine that can simulate a supposedly infinite number of universes. And so what he does is he goes into little virtual reality embryo thingy, picks a rando body to inhabit, shoots himself into a weird reality, and he does a podcast with existing people, like, experts in drugs, or you have people who, like, psychologists, and like different people. And it's all, this podcast is being done at the same time that another seemingly unrelated story is going on. And it's a pretty clever idea, that you do imagine, for example, like the Joe Rogan podcast, where you would do, like, Joe Rogan talks with Jocko Willink, right, the Navy SEAL guy. And so you would do that, and Clancy is like the Joe Rogan character, and so you would have him be an owl, and he's going around talking to Jocko Willink, and Jocko, in this particular episode, is a weasel, and the weasel is made of gold, and he lives on the fanciful unicorn planet, where he's harvesting belly button lint from extinct giants, or so we thought were extinct. But they're not. That's the shtick, right? There's a podcast going on and some random other story going on at the same time. And sometimes the podcast relates to the rando story, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that is my disconnect. Ultimately, I did not enjoy having essentially two red herring stories being told simultaneously. This season, I believe, is 10 episodes long, 10 or 8 episodes. Point is, the first half of the season, I was more interested in the rando stories that were going on than the podcasts. An example of what I'm talking about with the disconnect is there's an episode where Clancy is talking to someone like talking about mindful meditation. Mindful meditation is this concept of meditating specifically to focus on your own body and being present in the moment. It's actually really fascinating concept. Like, I'm very familiar with mindful meditation. It's actually something I do myself. So there's a podcast going about talking about mindfulness meditation and its usefulness on life and scenarios. But the story going on is Clancy goes into this prison world where all the prisoners can't die. They get Groundhog Day'd if they die. If they're murdered or if they have an accident or something, they immediately rewind time and go back to their scenario. And The rando story is about a prisoner who wants to escape this prison, and this prisoner is a very violent prisoner who tries on multiple occasions to escape through murder and mayhem, but every time he tries murdering, it fails because he gets killed and he gets resurrected, and slowly but surely he learns to be less aggressive in order to properly escape the prison, because it starts from having to fight every single prisoner to rallying all the prisoners to help each other escape the prison. And that story was more interesting than all the yakking that was going on in the podcast. And again, as much as I am very interested in the subject, mindfulness meditation, it felt like it was like watching two shows at once. It's like concentrate on that or concentrate on the random story. And that was my biggest pet peeve of this series, basically. On the other hand, as the series went on, the podcast started getting more interesting, and the animations they were putting to try to go along with it started to become the distractions as opposed to the other way around. The biggest example is, in fact, the spoiler here. We'll go ahead and go into spoilers. Is the last episode where Clancy's voice actor, hold on, I've pulled up, Duncan Trussell. There's a thing many times in the series where Clancy will be talking to whoever he's podcasting, and they'll refer to Clancy as Duncan, and then Clancy will say it's Clancy. It's like it's a nice little fourth wall break that I kind of appreciate, as much as I find the format kind of grating. I do kind of find that kind of clever. Anyway, the final podcast is with Duncan Trussell's mother, who's a psychologist who has cancer, and the podcast is with his mother, and it's done very real, like very raw. It's clearly Duncan doing the interview and not Clancy. The reason why I'm not gelling with Midnight Gospel is that podcasts, as someone who listens to a lot of podcasts for me are very inherently an audio only thing. I almost never watch the visuals of what's going on. A good example being, I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts, and what I do is I essentially fire them up on my commute. Back when I had a commute. I still do a little bit of driving around for my job. So I still listen to it, not as much as when I actually went to an office. But anyway, that aside, for me, podcasts inherently are very much a tell, don't show kind of idea. And I feel like muddying them with rando animations doesn't serve them well. Again, all of this is my opinion and my feelings on the matter. You know, I do not like that. I feel like, I mentioned earlier in the video, it's like a tug of war. It's like watching two shows at once. I'm either interested in the first half of the seasons, more interested in the random stories, or the podcasts in the latter half. So that's kind of my chief ultimate complaints as to why I didn't really gel with Midnight Gospel. But again, as I mentioned in my TLDR, even though I didn't enjoy Midnight Gospel, I still respect it because it's very clearly trying to do something different. And that in and of itself should be celebrated, because there is no way that Midnight Gospel could exist in conventional primetime television. It's too weird. It's too convoluted. It doesn't sell well to the popcorn eating masses. And I suppose by admitting that I didn't enjoy it, am I somehow inadvertently admitting that I am a lowbrow popcorn eating Neanderthal? Maybe, you know. I do have friends who love Midnight Gospel. They just can't shut up about it. And that's great, because they clearly glean something from it. And again, the podcasts, some of them are very insightful and enlightening. It's just, I just didn't gel with the dual thing, the double-de-do that I keep yammering about. I keep repeating that I felt like doing two things at once, and it just didn't gel right. Very much like that video game design philosophy of stick to one mechanic, because if you try to stuff too much stuff into the video game, you're just going to end up doing all of those things poorly as opposed to doing one thing really well. But, again, I'm glad it was made. It appears to be something that is only going to be one season. If it does get a second season, then great. You know, I may or may not watch it because of my feelings on this first season. But the fact that it was made, I think, is a good sign, because it shows that animation is really starting to stretch its wings and really starting to experiment, which means that they are going to be more, they being the greater powers that be that greenlight all of this nonsense, like Netflix, they are starting to be more lenient as to letting in new ideas, which I appreciate, because my whole thing is I want to make my own ideas, and I want them to be open-minded enough to accept things that aren't just another Simpsons family animated sitcom thing, you know? So all in all, I'm glad that Midnight Gospel exists. It's a good sign for people like me, creators like me. Even though I didn't enjoy it, it means that it was given a chance, and I appreciate that. And to be fair to Midnight Gospel, it is a thinker, and it's very cerebral. Even though I didn't enjoy it emotionally, to an extent, I did enjoy it intellectually. So it does have points there. Anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop rambling about it. So you people know what to do. If you like what you see and you want to see more, go ahead and tickle the sacred buttons. You know, like the video, subscribe, notification bell, yibbity yabbity. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, this is one of those shows that I didn't totally like, so there may be some of you who love this show who hate me for expressing my wrong opinion. So go ahead and let me know how wrong I am, or how right I am, or if you just want to say something in general. Also, go ahead and share the video, because you know you watch good content, and this is good content because you're watching it and you're smart. And of course, if you want to stalk me elsewhere on the interbutts, I always leave my social media links on the screen, as well as the link down below that goes to the intro video that goes to the links from there. So, with all that said, I thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you all stick around, and until next time, adieu, seers.